One of the reasons I came to Woodford this year was they offered me this gig. And I've been doing a few gigs. And I thought, now there's a challenge. What's so funny about cancer 8 o'clock in the morning on the last day of the year? And I'm so glad that I did it. And I'm so glad that you guys are here to share with us this in-depth conversation. Or it might be shallow and superficial, who knows? We don't. But I'd like to introduce the guests we have this morning. First off, we have John Thompson, barrister, but he's a good guy anyway. Orator, great singer, and a great Woodford stalwart who's been around for many years, performing here at the festival. A good bloke. We also have Carolyn Mandersloot, who is not a barrister, which automatically makes her a good bloke, except for the bloke bit, a good person, or dare I say, even woman, without, I don't want to be gender specific. We are all, a person, she's a person other than a man. And I didn't mean to say a person other than a person who isn't a woman. And I had a few wines last night, and because I'm into a healthy lifestyle right up until last night, the first gig I did here was What's So Funny About Being Sober. Did anyone see that show? Okay. I gave up drinking. This is no bullshit. I actually stopped drinking. I was so inspired by these people. They're all bright-eyed and really, really cool, and they told me it was the best thing in their life, and that bullshit. I gave up drinking, inspired by that show, and it was just boring. When I say I gave up drinking, I lasted till lunchtime, and then I thought, not that I'm an alcoholic or anything. I've seen alcoholics, they don't drink, and they know exactly how long they haven't drunk for. And so I drink, I'm not an alcoholic. And we're talking about cancer this morning, and there isn't a 12-step program for cancer. You can just get it in one step. And let's find out about these people. And first of all, we just ask John to tell us a little bit, a short bio, mate. What's your condition? What's your attitude? What are you doing here, and why are you doing it? And will you last the hour? Go.
My condition is largely nervous. What am I doing here? Well, I said yes, and I had no idea what was going to happen. So often has occurred during the course of my life. And I hope it works out okay, as it so often has during the course of my life. As S said, I have a history as a lawyer and as a law student and as a folk singer mostly. I made a living off the law for 14 years, and then I made a living off folk music for 14 years. Law pays better. I went back to law for about 18 months for financial greed reasons. And then I went on a trip to the UK. It was sort of one last Cloud Street tour, because I'd gone back to work. And when I came back, I'd had a few unusual stomach pains over the preceding few months. And I've scheduled visits with doctors to sort of sort stuff out. But it was a colonoscopy was put off until a few months after I got back. I was lying on the couch, my stomach was sore, particularly sore, and it felt a bit unusual this time. So I stood up, went, ow, that hurts, sat back down, called an ambulance. They took me to hospital, thought that it might be something like diverticulitis, a little bit of a glitch in your abdomen. But then as they went on, they found out there was something going on in my intestines. A couple of days later, they said, oh yeah, well there's a bit of stomach contents in your torso, and that's wrong. So we're going to operate. Oh, I said, oh, when? 5? Oh, okay. And it was about 3 o'clock. 3:05, someone came in and said, we're going now. Okay. Turns out there was a cancer that had developed in my bowel, and it had decided it was time to leave. sort of burst through the side of the bowel. That was the problem. They thought they got everything was okay, sort of stitched up and sent away and stuff. So I was in the hospital for a couple of weeks. And then a couple of days later they said, well, we thought that bit on your liver was just external stuff, but we've done an MRI and you've got metastatic cancer from your bowel in your liver. And it's pretty bad. You've got a dozen tumours through your liver. They're both sides, so they can't operate. They can't transplant because there's just too much cancer. And so, yeah, we had a chat about what stage 4 means. That was, the question was how long ago was that? That was just 2 years and nearly 6 months, 5 months. So this is my third Woodford with cancer.
Yeah.
And John, what was the prognosis 2 years ago?
2 years ago, we talked a little bit about this the other day, about there being a bell curve and how I try to make sure that I don't treat the middle of the bell curve as an appointment. It's a stat, and some people fall one side of the stat, some people fall the other. The middle of my bell curve was 3.5 years. The 5-year survival rate for my condition is 5%. So, as I said a couple of days ago, I'm probably okay for a personal loan, but I wouldn't give me a mortgage. Yeah, so it's not something they can fix. Chemo's slowing it down, and at some point chemo will stop working. And I'm on my second range of chemo drugs. We'll get into a bit more about what that means, and thank you so far for not freaking out. I'm doing my best.
Okay, well, thank you, John. We have... Yeah, get cancer and people clap for no reason.
You get cheek
I
bust
have to work hard for my claps.
Here's a small gag I prepared earlier. Put it on.
I wish I hadn't said that. Our other guest, the one who's a gender other than male and has a sickness other than cancer, is Carolyn. And Carolyn is a palliative care nurse. Let's hear from her. Carolyn, please tell us something about your background and what you do.
Well, thank you so much. My name's Carolyn and I don't have cancer. Well, I probably do have somewhere, but I haven't found it yet, so...
That's just gloating.
That's just competitive.
Race you to the finish.
You're on. So I work in community palliative care and I specialise in people who want to die at home. So I do a lot of public talking about death literacy and talking about death and dying. I love the topic.
Sorry, what you said. I hope people who want to die at home. I thought, God, your place must be a mess.
Well, my kids tell people that I help people to die, and so a lot of people actually think that I'm a sexy assassin, and I can totally see why.
Not yet. Hang on, how exactly do you help them to die?
We'll go into that later.
You know, Pope Leo XII actually died during orgasm, and I think that's a perfect way to go, and I hope that I go that way.
The things you remember.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, not with an altar boy. I prefer, a gender other than altar boy. But it's a good way to go. You go, dead, done.
I was raised a Catholic and taught by the Christian Brothers, but fortunately I was a very ugly child.
Well, unfortunately, I was beautiful, and I still think about those nights of the glass of holy wine, the candles on, a sacred hymn on the turntable, snap of rubber gloves. Beautiful.
Well,
Anyway, back to whatever it is.
That's another show.
Back to your story.
well, that's the little
have my
death.
own
I tend to
brief.
specialise in the big deaths, and the permanent deaths. So yeah, I mean the little deaths are good, but the big deaths are the ones that you want to make the most of. So
They're the ones that bring in the cash for you.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, well, not really. But
Do you ever get that imperative? Like, you've got bills to pay and he's hanging on.
well, I get paid. Yeah, I get paid. I'm really good at what I do. Seriously, I have a 100% success rate.
Do you get paid or you just work on commission?
Only at Woodford.
Any jewellery that happens to be lying on the road.
I'm a professional. No, so yeah, I work out in the community on the Sunshine Coast in Gympie area. We do very well at people dying at home. We have about a 70 to 80% rate. It's a big thing. It's a big thing to know.
It's just the times you pick to look at me. And it's a big thing dying at home. Everyone's doing it. You should get on board early.
I'm a planner. It's like a wedding planner. It's like, John, you've met me now. Don't think you're going to get out do this without me, darling. I'm the best there is.
I'm cool with that. That's good. Oh, sorry. The mother of the cellist that isn't Rebecca from the Little Cloud Orchestra is actually one of my palliative care team at the RBH. So it's very competitive. There's lots of people who want my work here.
I've got the good drugs. Remember. Anyway, so I was just reflecting. I actually did stand-up comedy for the first time at the Planting about 2.5 years ago in this tent. So I've gone out to do stand-up comedy as well and talk about death a lot in my stand-up comedy. So just saying, it really doesn't matter if I die on stage because it's all within the theme of what I'm talking about. So, so I'm very excited to be invited up here today to talk about death and dying and cancer and humour. Because I think it's very important to die with a bit of style and die laughing.
So Carolyn, this interest in death and dying, have you always had that, or did something actually happen to spark your interest in this area?
Well, I hospital trained, and the very first shift I ever went up onto the ward.
You're what trained?
Hospital trained.
Oh.
A hospital trained nurse, or a registered nurse. The very first shift I went up, the little lady I was looking after died, and it wasn't my fault, not that time. But the experience of doing that, because the thing was that as a student nurse, my job was to lay her out, and that's, anyone know about laying out bodies? It's probably no one knows. It's where you sort of wash her body and then wrap her up in a shroud and then take her down to the morgue on your way to tea. And I sort of got out of it because when I was about to take her down to the morgue, I noticed that her teeth were sitting in a cup on her bedside table. And so I thought I'd forgotten to pop her teeth in. So I sort of grabbed them and popped them in my pocket. We took her down to the morgue and then got her down there and unwrapped, tried to put her teeth back in. And it was hard because she was really stiff and had no teeth. And so I got them back in and we wrapped her up and put her in, and I got back up onto the ward again, and one of the other little old ladies came up to me. And she was like, "Have you seen my teeth?" And I just said, "Honey, you know you don't have any teeth." But so death has always followed me. So,
No, hang on. Let me get this straight. So you're a nurse in a hospital, and all your patients died suddenly and unexpectedly. You thought you would turn that to your advantage and say, "Well, that's what I deal in."
Well, I think it was because when I went to Perth and was in my first year out, I worked on an AIDS ward, and it was back in the very sort of early 90s where they weren't quite freaking out about AIDS anymore, but lots of people were dying from it. And so I would go to work and, like, say 6 people would die that day. And because I was in the hospital, it always seemed to be with these people when they died. And they were always allowed to die. So, knock wood, I've never actually been involved in a resus where someone's tried to die. So if anyone tries to die, don't do it around me because, you're fucked. I'm not going to be able to resuscitate you because that's not what I do.
Is this part of the reason that a lot of people die around you, maybe?
I don't have those skills.
You're like a jinx.
We haven't come here today to judge your nursing skills.
They're good. I have 100% success rate.
Yeah, I know.
But normally you try and keep people alive. Your 100% success rate is like 100% bad rate because everyone dies around you.
Well, who's to say it's bad?
Me.
Well,
I
right
don't
now
want
it
to
might
die.
be bad.
Have you? Are you married?
I am. Well, what?
Wow.
Was.
I
Wow, that was the weirdest pickup line context I've ever seen.
Well, let's just cut to it. I mean, life is short, eh, John? We may as well.
It's like a marriage counsellor saying, so what are you doing after this?
The whole
Didn't seem
sexy
rocky.
assassin thing got to me, but she's married, but probably in a couple of weeks she won't be, I reckon. Anyway, so
It was a
you've
good
got
end.
into the whole palliative care, and this has become your passion now. And where do you work in Gympie?
So I work for an organisation called Little Haven Palliative Care, which is community-based. It's a grassroots community. It's been run by the community. It's not tied in with the hospital at all. So we've had a lot of autonomy to be able to do the work that we do. So we actually got written up in the Royal Commission on best practice of community palliative care that went to Canberra. Yeah. We got mentioned 7 times, so as gold standard palliative care.
Well, that's really good. Gold medal, good on you.
I've got it here if you want me to
yeah,
read
I feel
it.
like we should wear it. Now, John, I'm interested in that. I imagine that for us here in the audience, probably the worst thing that could happen to you is you go to the doctor and the doctor says, you've got cancer, terminal cancer. There's not much we can do. This would be a nightmare for me. Can you tell me how you felt at that moment, or what went on, how you've dealt with that? Because it must be absolutely, well, world-changing for you.
Well, it was interesting. I was lying in a bed, and yeah, I can remember exactly where it was because, of course, a pretty significant life thing. I remember thinking, I think my first thought was, oh no, will you be okay? And looking at my wife, Nicole, who's over there. And Emma was with us as well. And the person that I weirdly thought I needed to comfort at the time, it didn't quite get to this point, but it was close, was the consultant who was telling me he was taking it really badly. And later on, I thought that was really unfair of him. That, like, sort of, you know, in a very real sense, this moment was about me. And I actually find that quite difficult, the sort of trying to turn a creative focus internally, because I deal with a lot of things by, translating them into jokes. Of course, that's a really big thing. I described it the other day as it's hypervigilance turned to good use. It's called quick wit, but that's really not what it is. You're just anxiously zipping around the place. But so that was a big focus for me, was like how everyone else in the room was dealing with it. It had a hint of unreality about it, because I think he said the range probably had about 2.5 years, and it wasn't until the other doctor came in. If you need an oncologist, especially for bowel cancer, I really recommend Matthew Burge. Awesome guy. So it turns out that up the road from where I live, about 10 minutes, is the RBH, and my oncologist is the guy who does all the clinical trials into the type of cancer that I have. We asked him about a particular treatment. He said, I actually wrote the most recent paper on that. And he's a lovely guy, so lovely that I bought him a T-shirt of my own design, which he said he will only wear gardening. It says, turns out it was a tumour.
Not just wind.
Yeah, well, I thought it was probably something wind-related that had me raced off to hospital. But yeah, it's confronting. It is a process. We talked about the word journey the other day. I don't like the word journey because I think MasterChef is a journey. And a journey involves a young boy going to a far-off land and achieving his sword, and then returning having slain something he didn't like. That's a journey, and I don't feel I'm on that.
I've been on a few journeys, and I don't think I've slain anything. I think a journey is just going from one place to another. I just want to, you don't have to slay things. I've been to Fiji, no one died. I came back with a little wooden sword that had my name on it, but it's not really, I didn't have to pull it from a rock or anything.
I'm pretty sure someone died while you were there.
Well,
I'm not implicating you.
Maybe she's doing her trick by Reiki, long distance, people it's just...
Oh no, I was
people-
there.
Maybe all the deaths in the world are your fault. You could be like the demon person.
I just have to check. You're not sponsored by a pillow company, are you?
Well, if you're taking too long, places to be.
Oh, we talked about that. And what happens if you're ready for death? Okay, everyone's gathered around. You've said your goodbyes. You're lying in the bed, and it's... Yeah. Does he know I've got lunch?
And, yeah, that's right. Carolyn's counting the minutes. Yeah, yeah. Come on.
The meter's on.
So Carolyn, you've obviously been in this situation where someone has learnt they've got their diagnosis of cancer. Have you actually been in that situation where someone has actually learnt for the first time that this is the end game now? Or do you treat people after they know?
Well, professionally, we usually get people. There was a study done that's showing that early referral to palliative care has better outcomes for people. So they live longer with less symptoms and have a better end. So
Can I just put something in there? When I said I have a palliative care team, I see them every 3 months and have for the last 9 months or so. I don't actually need them. Like, they're not providing me with any active assistance or stuff. They might renew a prescription for me, but mostly it's checking in and knowing that I've got this team of 3 people. There's a doctor, a palliative care nurse, and a pharmacist. Sit down and go, how's it going? Is there anything you need? It's a great thing. So yeah,
and it's
definitely think
part
that's
of your support net, so that when you do fall off the edge or start going down that slippery slide, you've got it all set up. We'll talk about this later, John. This is a bottle of wine, darling.
So the question...
I'm at Woodford.
Nicole, I'm being seduced.
So she.
So Carolyn, the question is, you must see a range of reactions people have to their diagnosis of terminal disease. People are told that they're going to die. We're all going to die, but we'll get into that later. But you must see the whole gamut of responses. Can you describe some of those?
Oh, absolutely. And the thing with palliative care, and when people everyone's individual and everyone reacts to it in an individual way, and they go about it in a way. So I always seem to think that people die the way they live. So, when you've got someone who might be a really prickly, difficult character, sometimes they have a prickly, difficult end no matter what you try and do for them. So, and with palliative care, it doesn't always have to be cancer either. It might be a very slow, or it might be something that, when you were diagnosed with metastatic cancer, essentially you were palliative at that stage. But you could have, 5-7 good years before you get to the prickly end and die of that cancer.
Or I might not have made it to the lift.
Exactly, yeah. Well, you could have died in surgery, and not actually died of the cancer, but you could have bled out on the table. You could have.
We've talked about this. It's okay.
We've got safe words.
Yeah, I like. Help! No.
Get her off.
I have learnt that "fuck no, I'm on fire" is a bad safe word.
You guys are professionals. I'm getting ill and paranoid about my health.
You're looking a bit peaky this morning.
I am peaky.
Hey, no, but if Bill Horrocks is still alive, nothing you do to your body can harm you. Seriously, we didn't think he was going to live through the first millennium.
Yeah. I mean, if you call that alive, there's nothing to fear. Born palliative. Fiddle players, eh?
I've just remembered something about being like the first diagnosis thing. I remember actually thinking this, and the Buddhist-y part of my brain is very happy with this. I remember part of me went, wow, that's interesting. So it took a while before it sort of came a bit closer to being, oh, it's me. Right, okay, yeah. I used to think, I knew about mortality. I didn't know they were going to be specific.
Well, in a way, you've suddenly got a hint in the final chapter of your life. You sort of know how it's going to end. You don't know exactly how that's going to look, but it's, you know the theme of that chapter.
Oh, yeah, but you and I talked the other day about one of the big things, and I think it's partially because it's me, but partially because I'm a man. I don't really like uncertainty. Yeah, I know, it's a life problem. and of course, none of us knows what's going to happen. And the way I look at it is we set up our lives with jobs and bills and routines and things as a way of feeling that we've got control over what's happening. And then something like you break your leg walking down a flight of stairs and your life's changed completely. Well, it's not. You were never in control. That was the illusion. And so dealing with that sort of having some rigidity in my thinking and dealing with this, well, I know we'll get into details, but pain isn't something that features in my symptoms at the moment. I get tired. I get a bit nauseous sometimes. I'm on a break from chemo at the moment. I take a break for a few weeks so I can do Woodford. And yeah, I'm pleased about that too. But then you deal with stuff like, I'm conscious that this could be my last one just because of energy levels. But also you just, having no idea about what's going to happen next is one of the most interesting things for me, and something I find it makes me a little bit anxious sometimes, and ill-tempered even, on occasion.
But this is the interesting thing. We all know that we're going to die, but it lives in a part of our brain that we don't acknowledge. We just sort of know it without really acknowledging it. So when something like this happens to you, it's just bringing to the forefront the reality. I'm making myself sad now. No, I'll be all right, John, if you comfort me.
I'm not sure for how long I'll be able to comfort you.
Just don't let her near me. I got another 2 days yet.
God, it must be awful. Imagine, and one day you'll recognise her at the door and go, oh, God.
Knock, knock. Oh. Bring in the Mormons.
You know, if I turn up, you're in trouble.
The smiling assassin. But it must, I know that you've had some not religious, but spiritual background. I think it was in Buddhist ideology.
I was raised a Catholic, but then I sort of found the Buddhist community in Brisbane through Marie Robertson, who I used to sing with. And the Karuna is a hospice in Brisbane that is run in conjunction with the Brisbane Buddhist community. And so I've got a counsellor there. They're fantastic. They do weekly meditations, Monday afternoon, 4 p.m, pretty vaguely secular sort of meditation, but good. They have nuns, if you like nuns.
I love nuns.
That wasn't a real nun.
Wasn't it?
I'm guessing we're talking about the internet.
So all nuns don't have beards, right? Still, it's no fun like a nun. Anyway, back to you.
Just, John, in regards to when you're talking about control and like the little death, how you have to sort of release and let go, the big death's similar to that as well.
I know it's okay to swear, but we seem to be, rather than swearing, can I say, sexual climax is what she's referring to when she says the little death,
yes,
the
right.
petit mort in French, as it's known. You may have been being too subtle for the Woodford audience. I don't mean to be patronising, that is, speak down to you.
You just The thing about the little death that's different to the big death is that you can't have a cigarette after the big death.
Well, everyone else can.
And yet the flames leap higher and higher.
It'd be good if you could have a cigarette after the big death because you wouldn't be worrying about, cancer.
Well, I've largely stopped drinking, but I've been smoking during this festival because it's not going to kill me.
That's not what the packet says.
Throat cancer, pussies.
Okay. I want to know more about this. What gets you through? Now I know you have your family, and we'll get onto that in a minute. But this spiritual ideology, and you have the Buddhist backing, and Buddhism in itself acknowledges, unlike many religions where they deny death because you're going to be reincarnated or you're going to go to heaven, which is a way of denying the finality of it, and it's just a way of keeping people oppressed by, if you just be good, you'll live forever somewhere else.
I think the official line, it allows people to have hope.
And you can have hope.
I don't think so.
However baseless. It's okay, I'm there.
But Buddhism, in another way, acknowledges death, right?
Yeah, I think...
You all right, John?
So far. Oh, geez. You still get colds. And cheap registration.
And air-conditioned dongers.
And air-conditioned dongers, yeah. It took cancer to get me a bloody air-conditioned room in this festival.
Really? I've had one ever since I've been here.
What do they know that you don't? Quick, Carolyn, stat. Thompson, stat.
So, tell us about the Buddhism ideology. That's
Okay, I don't actually have a firm personal position on reincarnation. I figured I'll know it if I see it. But mostly for me, the appeal to the Buddhist stuff is the incredibly developed intellectual discipline that they have. Like for thousands of years, they've been arguing with each other about it, so it's fantastic. The ability to investigate calmness in the mind, I find really useful. I find it a useful thing to deal with as a way of approaching most human situations, that they can teach you something, and as a starting point, that thing I talked about earlier. Oh, that's interesting. If you respond like that to everything, then it's a pretty nice way through. It doesn't mean bad things don't happen. What it does is it helps you decide how deeply you want to engage with how bad the thing is, or you can deal with it.
So, Carolyn, you've seen a lot of people dying. How beneficial or detrimental, or what role does spiritual or religious belief play in their coping with this final curtain?
Well, it all depends on the person. So I've looked after people who are like exclusively brethren, who have a very deep understanding and a very secure, solid belief of what's happening with them. And they've done death beautifully. The whole family have just coped with the whole thing. Remember we had a lady die at home, and they do everything in the home. So they bring the coffin in, and they've got with the glass perspex, you can see them through the thing. They've got this big esky that you clip around it, and they keep them in the home as long as possible before they then take them and bury them. But I remember looking at one of the teenage boys who was sort of looking quite joyful, and said to him, so, in your religion, where's Mum? And he's just like, she's in paradise. And he was so joyful to think that that's where she was. And I thought, well, that's good. For you to be all thinking that she's now in paradise is a really lovely thing. But then you get people who are very existentially distressed of not so much where they're going, but the fear of that journey, the bit to getting to the dead bit.
I thought we were going to avoid euphemisms. The bit to get into the death bit.
No, the dead bit. Because, I think you're alive.
Dead bit?
Yeah, well, you hear me.
Don't get angry,
I'm the
John.
professional. Listen. So you're alive.
I'll cut you, man.
And then you're dead. And it only actually takes about 30 seconds to die. And the rest of the time you're alive. So the last little dead bit is about 30 seconds.
Look at them.
Sorry, actually.
You okay?
Yeah. I just seen this thing about she's in paradise. I mean,
That's their
it's all right
belief.
to die happy, but that's just being delusional right to the end. But you think is that beneficial? Is it good to actually acknowledge truth at the end, or
Okay,
just
I
say delusional right to the end?
I used to do a lot of work in mental health law, like forensic mental health stuff. And so I used to do a lot of hospital visits, and we used to have these this big discussion with one of the doctors there about whether or not people have a right to be mad if they're not hurting anyone.
To be bad or mad?
Mad.
Yes.
So if you're delusional and functioning in the community, as I believe so many of us are, then what's the problem?
Well, there's no problem except that life is a journey, John. And I think it's...
I mean, you can't look at someone who's dying and go, how dare you be happy about what's going to happen, because I don't agree.
I think it's a movement towards enlightenment, towards having more knowledge to gaining understanding. And if you're stuck in a religion which is nonsense, or maybe not, but, come on.
Just because you don't believe doesn't mean you're not going to
And
hell.
if you die happy, doesn't mean you've had a good life. To die realistically means you've had a good life, to make some progress. But if the propaganda is so strong that you make no movement in your life and you even go through dead thinking you've gone to paradise and mum's in paradise, something incredibly sad about that to me.
You may feel that person is wasting their intellect, but if it's what gets them through, it doesn't really matter that they die with you disagreeing with them.
Well, yeah. It doesn't matter, it just seems the way. So no, I don't think a person in that situation had intellect to start with.
Yeah. Oh
I
well.
think it's interesting. I know that's...
When I get to heaven, which I expect will look something like this, I'll miss you.
Well, I won't be there. I'll be with all my friends in the other place, where there's wine and the reality, acknowledging the mortality, this denial of death, which, having some other place to go to or reincarnation, it's wonderful. But it just seems a bit of a waste of a life to have made no progress. Jesus died on the cross to show us that the only way that you can live forever is to know that you don't. We live our whole lives. We cannot experience death. Only other people can experience other deaths, but we cannot experience death. We're just alive forever. But we do die. This is the conundrum. This is why I've started a religion, and you can all join. $10. Die angry. I'm going to be one of those guys who go, fuck this, and I'll be kicking her and
I'll have all
in
of
a
the
sexy
jokes.
way.
Why, when you say I've started a religion, do I see the headline, sexual misconduct scandal?
Yeah, well, that's what you do in religion, sexual misconduct scandal. That's what religion is. SMS.
As an ex-choir boy, I think we should move on.
What about the Mormons? So the Mormons all believe that you go and wait in a room, and then when the second coming of Christ comes, then you all come back.
There's a sacred foyer.
I'll talk about the vestibule
Who cares?
later.
I believe in Superman. I'm an ex-Catholic. I believe that Superman is the second coming of Jesus. He came from another place. He had people who aren't his real parents. At the age of 33, he went out and did good, truth, justice, in a sustainable way. I believe in Superman. Doesn't mean it's real.
What was the safe word?
And God so disliked his only begotten son that he sent him to earth on a suicide mission.
Pineapple.
Oh fuck, no, I'm on fire.
Okay, so let's get into...
Hang on, I was going to need a safe word, not you.
Oh, sorry, I was just feeling a little unsafe.
Let's
Yes,
move
let's-
away
let's-
from your religious beliefs. And
No,
go
let's
into-
get away from your religious beliefs.
Your religion.
I've got some issues.
Oh, duh.
Don't make fun of me, Father. John. Take it easy.
Very sad.
It is sad. Anyway, back to you. Support. You talked about your palliative crew. Let's talk
I'm gonna
about
call them
your
that from now
friends
on.
and family. You said that when you got the news, you were very concerned about how it affected other people.
Yeah.
How has it affected your family, your close friends?
Well, I think my household and my family and the people I play music with, Nicole Murray over there, hello, and Emma Nixon, who's down in Brisbane doing a gig tonight for money. And, well, yeah, they've been absolutely my core support. And as I said, that's my home and my family. And one of the hard things for me is having a thing that's been in my head for far too long, which is the need to make sure other people are okay. And so that's been one of the hardest things for me, because I've seen them suffering through the experience. Like, if I can separate myself from it for a second, I see two people unsure of what to do in the face of such a massive thing, and there are lots of times where I'm not sure how I can help. So you've just got to be as nice as you can to the other people in your life.
It's interesting you're talking about that, because you're the person with cancer and your main concern is about them. And I'm sure for them, they're just really concerned about you. But it's interesting that when I ask you about them, you're talking about your concern for them, not what they're doing for you.
They offer me much more help than I'm prepared to accept or think I should. So I'm learning to not go, no, I'm fine, go, thank you. And take the cup of tea even if I didn't really feel like one.
Has it made you love them more? Has it accelerated your letting go into love?
It would be wrong to admit that greater love would be possible than was already present. I used to get some of them off. Sorry, as a lawyer. Not as a choir boy.
I think that was a yes, or yes?
That was for you.
And I think the thing about sort of death and grief and great sadness is that it can only be there when there's great joy and great love. So the two things are always there at the same time.
Definitely. And I know that part of my caring for other people is selfish avoidance. Sort of avoiding thinking about my situation by going, oh, what about everyone else? Because I find I need to think about my situation in chunks. Because it is, oh shit, at some level. But yeah, it's looking after those people that are particularly close to me is important to me. And I think some of that focus is because at this stage of my illness, it's not really that big a problem. Like, I'm pretty healthy. I'm still gorgeous. And as I've said to other people, I hope my sense of humour is the last thing to go.
Well, you die how you live, so it could be a squeeze box.
It could be a squeeze box.
What's it called, boys and girls? You may beat her randomly later.
I'm so sorry.
I used to do schools gigs, and this is not about cancer, but Steve Cook's old, he's injured, he might have cancer. He's in the story, so I hope he doesn't, of course. It was a schools gig, and I was explaining the concertina, and I've always had a morbid fear of 12-year-olds since I met them. And there were year 7 kids in the class, and I had the concertina. How do you get the air into a concertina? This kid down the front went, "You suck." And from behind me, I hear, "No, you suck." And so to diffuse the situation, I said, "Or you blow." Which was probably a lung cancer reference. Anyway, we're back, and we're back in the room.
Now, as we move towards the end of this session, Carolyn was talking about how a lot of people want to die at home, and she supports that. I wonder if any of us think about how we would like to die. You know, I made the reference to Pope Leo XII, who died having sex. And to me, that seems like a fairly good way to go. John, have you envisaged how...
I can't
you'd
envisage
like to go?
anything except you having sex with the Pope now.
And
Or can they?
And as a palliative care nurse, it's just like
It's okay, one of them might not make it.
expanded somewhat.
If it's any consolation, the Pope doesn't look well.
I hope you've got a good family.
Do you go up to people in the street at Woodford that you think, and you give them a card?
Have I told you about my cards?
Yes. But you haven't told them.
Oh. So because in my stand-up I talk about being a death doula, and when I sort of wanted to market myself as a death doula, it was trying to think of a name to call myself. 'Cause
Death!
No one.
Death doula.
A
I was
death
thinking,
doula.
it's a baby. What?
You weren't pregnant. But it was trying to come up with another name that people knew because no one knew what a death doula was.
What about a
You
death
started
dealer?
laughing. But I'm thinking, maybe an end-of-life consultant, maybe a checkout chick. But I was just going to get some business card made, which a friend did, with just "you're fucked."
And on the back, put the last business card you'll ever need.
I didn't bring them. I was too embarrassed to bring them.
So,
But I will give you one.
as a person dealing in death, how do you envisage for yourself? Do you envisage a best way to die, that final moment?
How's it feel?
Yeah, let's turn the tables.
Come on. Yeah.
When you're not smiling and no one else is dying, and
Oh, no, hang on, I don't like-
it's your turn.
Well,
How do you envisage that?
I do like to tell this story with song and some interpretive dance, but we don't have the signers here. Oh, I would like to be at home in my own bed. I'd like to be with family around me, the good family, not the family I don't like.
You have a couple of families.
When I die, I'd like to be wrapped in soft fabrics and anointed in precious oils, and then I'd like to be cremated. So, but whether that happens or not, I might get hit by a bus.
All at
so
home?
Hopefully, yeah. See, I'd love to-
Cremation?
Yeah, well, we've got a fireplace. They might have to chop me up a bit to fit me in there. But,
Hey, we've got
No, you do the head.
we've got a in Nimbin now. We've got a crematorium. Actually, they're building a crematorium in Nimbin out of hemp brick, and it's actually got a shotgun hole halfway up the chimney. Like that all day, you can hear it going, and the old hippies getting burned because of safe space. It's wonderful. Pizza oven at the back. It's cool. You get the ash. It's got so much THC in it. You can roll it up in alfoil and sell it to the tourists.
well, they're not. They're selling to all the people who've got cancer.
It's nice to know a little bit of you is going out there and making the world a happier place. That's how I want to go.
We were talking about alternative therapies and people giving advice. I'll tell you this because it's such a great resource. There's an app from the Sloan Kettering Cancer Centre in the States, SLOAN Kettering, as you imagine it would be spelled, and it's called About Herbs. So whenever someone says, "Oh, mistletoe's really good," you can lemon juice, anything. It lists all the alternative. Oh, don't start me with fucking turmeric.
I think that was from the turmeric coffee
Yeah.
van.
I can't take turmeric because I'm on a blood thinner, but I've run out of blood thinner, and I figured I'm probably inhaling enough turmeric particles walking through the festival. What's the other thing? So yeah, I'm thinking of giving up chemo and taking up natural therapies. It's just the turmeric talking. But everyone suggests things, and what this allows you to do is check. It's got for professionals or for consumers. You can check what the latest research on that substance is. So someone, I think, suggested mistletoe to me, so I looked it up. I got to go to PubMed, the website, and look at the actual research papers into it, and there's been no measurable impact on life expectancy with colon cancer if you take mistletoe. So I didn't take mistletoe. But other things it says, actually, we don't know, it might be good. Okay, so I'll take some of that. But the important thing is, before I ramble on, with alternative stuff, I have decided to balance evidence-based medicine against the likelihood that my Facebook friends have discovered a cure for cancer. I mean, people are beautiful and well-meaning. I've made my decision about how I want to go. The important thing for me with natural stuff as well is, will it have a negative impact on my chemo? Because that's just the way I've decided to go, and also the chemo for me is being very effective. Scene.
Okay. Well, we're nearly at the end. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, God. No one? Okay, we've got 10 minutes. Would you, if you can shout out your question, and I'll repeat it. About your card, is that right?
My business card. Oh, no. You're pretty fucked when I'm involved.
She was just asking whether cards like inspirational
No.
things like
It's too late.
doesn't
Yeah.
look good.
It's too late for inspiration when you're dying.
You'll
you
never
know,
get that lay-by.
Questions? Yes. Yes?
Thank you.
So, that, for those that can't hear, it wasn't actually a question, it was more like thanking the palliative care and maybe wondering how we can access, or how do we improve palliative care in our society, in our community. And probably now, as we, the planet is dying and we're all coming to the end days, sad for the kids, but, just don't tell them. And that's why we have Facebook and stuff like that, because they won't even notice. And we do need more palliative care. Actually, we need palliative care for the planet, probably. We need to expand the horizons.
Actually, can I just answer this? When it comes to death and dying, it's always grassroots. There's no one in this room that can't do death well. It's no magical thing. Fair enough, I'll know what drugs exactly to give you for symptoms, but that's a specialist side of it. But death and dying comes from you, and having conversations about it, and talking to your loved ones, and finding out what's important to them, and how they want to be at the end when it comes. Because we're all going to do it. So there's no special answer or knowledge. It's just empowering yourselves to just take it on and to ask the questions. When you've got a diagnosis or you know that you're going to die, it's asking, all right, so I'm in this area, what's around to support us? And that's both with the medical system and other things. So other death doulas or groups or, volunteer organisations. So find out what's in your area and bring it back into the community, bring it back to that compassionate community and do it together. It's only going to come from the ground. It's not going to come from above. It's not financial.
Carolyn, when we were talking the other day, you mentioned how people prepare for births, and there's a comparison there. Could you talk about that a bit?
Absolutely. So death is like that transition. So, birth there's been a big change in how people, I had home births because I had a choice and I could get a home birth midwife and birth wherever I wanted. So death's no different, but people freak out because they deny it so much because our medical system's so good. So, you had this cancer 20 years ago, you would have died 2 years ago. So, 20 years ago. But
and I'd miss me.
yeah, exactly. We all would have. We wouldn't have had this conversation, so you never would have met me. but but like
Ups and downs.
I'd be having
There.
breakfast.
But like I'll talk to you later.
Please don't. I want to live long and prosper.
He's not in denial at all.
So when people know what you do and you walk up to them, they go, "What do you want?"
They love me. Look at this smile. Why would you want? Yeah.
It's deceptive.
I know, right? But I have all the good drugs.
Okay, I'm interested now.
Anyway, so with birth,
You're nice.
with birth you can plan it. You think, all right, well, I've got this, we're going to have this baby. Where do we want to have it? How do we want to have it? Who do we want around? Where are we going to go? So it's sort of, you have a lot of choice about it and there's some planning. The death's no different, and especially when you're lucky enough to have cancer and know that's going to happen. You know, there's always the sudden death or the traumatic death, which, you know, we're not going to know that's going to be happening. But when you know someone's got a palliative condition that at some point they're going to die from that condition, you have time. You have time to
Definitely.
work things out with people, to cross your T's, dot your I's, get your affairs in order.
That very much, it's very much a thing that the Buddhists talk about how lucky you are to have a long period of notice of your death, so you can get ready. And at least, and I don't know about the reality or otherwise of reincarnation, but I know somehow that it's more productive to avoid having your last thought be, "Oh fuck."
And I think that is the perfect way to end this session. I'd like you to thank John Thompson, Carolyn Mandersloot. I'm Sorrenssen. Thank you all. Enjoy your Woodford Day.
Thanks everyone. Have a good one.